She's lying there next to you, staring at the ceiling. You can feel the tension radiating from her body like heat from a furnace. You've been together for months, maybe years, and yet tonight feels like you're strangers sharing a bed. You reach over, hoping to bridge the distance, but she turns away with that familiar excuse, "I'm just not in the mood." You've heard this before. So many times that you've started keeping count. So many times that you've begun to wonder if something is fundamentally broken in your relationship, in her or in you. The movies make it look so effortless. Passion igniting instantly, bodies responding like perfectly tuned instruments, desire flowing like electricity between two people who can barely keep their hands off each other. But here's the reality that no one talks about. Everything you think you know about female arousal is wrong. The way you've been taught that desire works, the expectations you've built around how women should respond, the timeline you think passion should follow, it's all based on a fundamental misunderstanding that has destroyed more relationships than infidelity ever could. Today, I'm going to expose the lies you've been told about female sexuality and reveal why the vast majority of women experience arousal in ways that contradict everything our culture teaches us about desire. Because once you understand how female arousal actually works, you'll realize that most sexual problems aren't problems at all. They're just mismatched expectations colliding with biological reality. Walk into any bookstore, flip through any magazine, watch any romantic movie, and you'll encounter the same sexual mythology. Desire strikes like lightning. One moment you're having a normal conversation, the next you're consumed with passionate need. Eyes lock across a crowded room, chemistry ignites, clothes start disappearing, and within minutes both parties are lost in mutual ecstasy. This narrative has become so embedded in our cultural understanding of sexuality that we've started measuring real relationships against fictional standards. We expect desire to announce itself with fireworks, arousal to flip on like a light switch, and passion to maintain consistent intensity regardless of context, stress, or emotional climate. The result is millions of women who think they're sexually broken because they don't experience spontaneous combustion of lust. Millions of men who think their partners have lost interest because arousal doesn't arrive on demand. Millions of couples who have stopped being intimate because they're waiting for a lightning strike that may never come. But here's what the research actually shows. The vast majority of women don't experience desire the way movies portray it. They don't wake up randomly craving sex. They don't get turned on by simply thinking about their partner. They don't feel ready for intimacy before intimacy begins. Instead, they experience what researchers call responsive desire, arousal that emerges during physical and emotional connection rather than before it. For these women, desire doesn't come first, it comes last, after safety has been established, connection has been created, and the body has been given time to respond to stimulation. The entire framework we use to understand female sexuality is based on male sexual response patterns. This isn't accidental. It's the result of decades of sexual research conducted primarily by men, studying primarily male subjects, and then applying those findings to women as if sexual response were universal rather than gender-specific. Male arousal follows a relatively predictable pattern. Desire appears, arousal builds quickly, climax occurs, then everything returns to baseline. It's linear, goal-oriented, and efficient, like a machine designed for specific output within predictable timeframes. This male model became the template for how we think all sexuality should work. It created expectations that arousal should be immediate, desire should be spontaneous, and sexual encounters should follow a prescribed sequence from interest to satisfaction. The problem is that female arousal operates on completely different principles. It's not linear, it's circular, it's not goal-oriented, it's experience-focused, it's not efficient, it's contextual. Applying male sexual patterns to female sexuality is like using a map of New York to navigate London. The basic concept might be similar, but every specific detail will lead you in the wrong direction. Female arousal requires what male arousal doesn't: time, context, emotional safety, psychological engagement, and physical attunement. These aren't optional extras that enhance the experience. They're fundamental requirements that determine whether arousal occurs at all. One of the most destructive pieces of sexual advice ever given is, wait until you're in the mood. This guidance has left countless women waiting for a mood that may never arrive, and countless men wondering why their partners never seem interested in intimacy. The advice assumes that sexual desire operates like hunger, that it builds naturally over time until it demands satisfaction. But for the majority of women, sexual desire operates more like appetite at a restaurant. It emerges after you see the menu, smell the food, and begin the experience of eating. This creates a sexual deadlock where women wait to feel desire before engaging in intimacy, while their bodies are actually designed to develop desire through intimacy. They're waiting for the starting gun while standing at the finish line, wondering why the race never begins. Meanwhile, their partners interpret this lack of spontaneous desire as rejection, disinterest, or evidence that attraction has faded. The man who once believed his woman couldn't keep her hands off him now wonders if she even remembers he exists as a sexual being. The tragedy is that both parties are operating under false assumptions about how female arousal works. She thinks she should feel desire before physical connection. He thinks her lack of initial desire means she doesn't want physical connection. Both are wrong, and their wrongness is destroying their intimacy. Understanding female arousal requires understanding that women's bodies are designed for a completely different sexual architecture than men's bodies. While male arousal is like a speedboat, fast acceleration, high performance, quick completion, female arousal is like a sailboat that requires specific wind conditions, careful navigation, and patience to reach its destination. The physical changes that occur during female arousal happen gradually and require sustained stimulation to develop fully. Blood flow to the genital area increases slowly. The clitoris, which contains 8,000 nerve endings, swells and becomes more sensitive over time. The vaginal walls begin producing lubrication, but this process can take 20 to 40 minutes of consistent stimulation. The pelvic floor muscles, which play a crucial role in sexual pleasure, need time to relax and engage properly. The vagina itself undergoes significant changes, lengthening, widening, and positioning itself to accommodate penetration comfortably. The cervix moves to create more space and reduce the risk of painful contact. These aren't quick adjustments that happen in a few minutes of touching. They're complex physiological processes that require sustained attention, consistent stimulation, and the absence of pressure to perform or respond quickly. When these processes are rushed or skipped entirely, the result is predictable: discomfort, pain, distraction, and a negative association with sexual activity that makes future arousal even more difficult to achieve. Female arousal isn't just a physical process. It's an emotional and psychological one that requires specific conditions to flourish. The female nervous system is designed to prioritize safety over pleasure, connection over performance, and emotional intimacy over physical sensation. This means that a woman's capacity for arousal is directly linked to how safe, seen, and valued she feels in the relationship. If there's unresolved conflict, emotional distance, or underlying resentment, her body will resist sexual response regardless of physical stimulation. The requirement for emotional safety isn't weakness or neediness, it's biological programming. Women's bodies are designed to be sexually responsive only when the environment feels secure enough for vulnerability. This makes evolutionary sense. Sexual activity requires letting down psychological defenses and physical boundaries, which can only happen when trust is established. In long-term relationships, this emotional foundation often erodes without conscious attention. Couples stop having meaningful conversations, stop prioritizing quality time together, stop making efforts to maintain emotional intimacy. They expect physical intimacy to continue despite the deterioration of emotional connection. The woman in this scenario isn't being difficult when she says she doesn't feel close enough for sex. She's accurately reporting that her arousal system requires emotional proximity to function properly. Her body is designed to shut down sexual response when emotional intimacy is lacking. Modern life operates at a pace that is fundamentally incompatible with female arousal. We've become accustomed to instant gratification, rapid results, and efficient outcomes. This mindset penetrates every aspect of our lives, including our sexual expectations. The average sexual encounter in committed relationships lasts between 7 and 13 minutes. This time frame might be sufficient for male satisfaction, but it's inadequate for most women to experience full arousal, let alone satisfaction. It's like expecting someone to enjoy a gourmet meal that's consumed in 30 seconds. The mechanics might work, but the experience will be unsatisfying. Female arousal requires what our culture has almost forgotten how to provide: slowness. Not the grudging slowness of obligation, but the intentional slowness of exploration. Not the impatient slowness of foreplay that's endured before the real thing, but the luxurious slowness of discovering what creates pleasure. This slowness isn't inefficiency, it's necessity. The female body needs time to warm up, respond, and build arousal layers that create sustainable pleasure. Rushing this process doesn't just reduce enjoyment. It can create physical discomfort and psychological associations that make future arousal more difficult. The irony is that when couples embrace this slower pace, both partners often report more satisfying sexual experiences. The pressure to perform quickly is replaced by permission to explore thoroughly. The focus shifts from achieving goals to enjoying processes. Most people, especially men, have learned to touch women the way they would want to be touched themselves. This creates a fundamental translation error where male preferences for firm, direct, goal-oriented touch are applied to female bodies that respond better to light, varied, exploratory touch. Female skin is more sensitive than male skin, with a higher concentration of nerve endings that can easily become overwhelmed by touch that's too intense too quickly. What feels good to a man might feel overwhelming, distracting, or even painful to a woman, especially in the early stages of arousal. The female body requires touch that builds gradually in intensity, varies in location and technique, and responds to feedback about what's working. This kind of touch requires attention, patience, and genuine curiosity about creating pleasure rather than demonstrating skill. Many men approach female bodies like they're operating machinery, applying consistent pressure and technique until desired results are achieved. But female arousal responds better to touch that feels more like music, varying rhythm, building intensity gradually, creating anticipation through pauses and changes. The most common mistake is treating what many call foreplay as a brief warm-up before penetration. But for most women, this extended physical attention isn't preparation for the main event. It is the main event. The majority of female pleasure and orgasmic potential exist in areas that aren't directly stimulated during traditional penetration. Female arousal doesn't just happen in the body, it happens in the mind. The female brain during arousal shows activity patterns that are dramatically different from male patterns, with more areas lighting up and more complex networks activating throughout the experience. This means that psychological factors play a larger role in female arousal than in male arousal. What she's thinking about, how she feels about herself, what associations she has with the current situation, and what's happening in her mental landscape all directly impact her body's ability to respond sexually. The female mind needs to be engaged and activated for optimal arousal to occur. This engagement can happen through fantasy, anticipation, novelty, emotional connection, or sensory stimulation that captures her attention and directs it toward pleasure. Many women report that their most satisfying sexual experiences happen when their minds are fully present and engaged with the experience rather than distracted by external concerns, self-consciousness, or pressure to perform. Creating mental engagement requires understanding what activates her imagination and psychological arousal systems. This might involve conversation that builds anticipation, activities that create novelty and excitement, or simply ensuring that her mental space is clear enough to focus on pleasure, rather than competing with thoughts about work, family, or other responsibilities. If you're beginning to understand why so many couples struggle with sexual compatibility, despite genuine love and attraction for each other, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. The insights I'm sharing today challenge fundamental assumptions about sexuality that most people never question, and there's much more to explore about creating authentic intimacy in upcoming videos. Female arousal is highly contextual, meaning that the environment, timing, and circumstances surrounding sexual activity significantly impact a woman's ability to become aroused. Unlike male arousal, which can often override contextual factors, female arousal is sensitive to everything from room temperature to emotional atmosphere. The context that supports female arousal includes physical factors like privacy, comfort, cleanliness, and ambience, but extends far beyond the immediate environment. It includes the emotional context of the relationship, the stress levels both partners are carrying, the quality of recent interactions, and even the broader life circumstances affecting both people. A woman might be perfectly capable of arousal under the right circumstances, but completely unable to respond when those circumstances are absent. This isn't pickiness or high maintenance, it's how her arousal system is designed to function. Creating optimal context requires attention to details that might seem unimportant to male arousal, but are crucial for female response. This might mean ensuring emotional conflicts are resolved before attempting intimacy, creating physical environments that feel safe and inviting, or timing sexual activity when mental and emotional resources are available rather than depleted. The couples who report the most satisfying sexual relationships are typically those who have learned to create and maintain contexts that support female arousal, rather than expecting arousal to occur regardless of circumstances. One of the most counterintuitive aspects of female arousal is how negatively it responds to pressure. The more pressure a woman feels to become aroused quickly, respond enthusiastically, or reach specific outcomes, the less likely her body is to cooperate with those expectations. Female arousal requires a psychological state that's incompatible with performance pressure. It needs space for discovery, permission for variability, and freedom from timeline expectations. When a woman feels pressured to respond in specific ways or within specific timeframes, her nervous system activates stress responses that inhibit sexual response. This creates a cruel paradox where the more both partners want good sexual experiences, the more pressure they create that prevents good sexual experiences from occurring. The man who desperately wants his partner to enjoy herself creates anxiety that makes enjoyment difficult. The woman who feels pressure to respond enthusiastically becomes self-conscious in ways that block natural response. The solution requires both partners to release attachment to specific outcomes and instead embrace curiosity about what might emerge when pressure is removed. This doesn't mean caring less about sexual satisfaction. It means creating conditions where satisfaction can develop naturally rather than being demanded artificially. The fundamental truth about female desire is that for most women, it's responsive rather than spontaneous. This means desire doesn't arrive before sexual activity begins. It develops during sexual activity as the body and mind respond to appropriate stimulation and context. Understanding responsive desire completely reframes how couples approach intimacy. Instead of waiting for desire to appear naturally, partners can create conditions that allow desire to emerge through experience. Instead of interpreting lack of initial interest as rejection, they can recognize it as normal female sexual functioning. Responsive desire requires a different approach to initiating intimacy, one that begins with emotional connection, proceeds slowly through physical touch, and allows arousal to build gradually without pressure to respond quickly or enthusiastically. This understanding liberates women from feeling broken when they don't experience spontaneous desire, and liberates men from feeling rejected when their partners don't respond immediately to sexual advances. It creates space for authentic sexual experiences that honor how female arousal actually works, rather than how it's supposed to work according to cultural mythology. Unlike the linear progression of male arousal, female arousal follows a more circular pattern where desire, arousal, and satisfaction feed into each other in ongoing cycles, rather than following a predictable sequence toward a specific goal. This circular nature means that female sexual experiences can have multiple peaks, valleys, and plateaus that don't necessarily lead to traditional climax, but can be deeply satisfying nonetheless. It means that arousal can build, subside, and rebuild multiple times during a single encounter. Understanding this circular pattern helps couples appreciate sexual experiences that don't follow the traditional script of building arousal toward orgasm and completion. It creates space for sexual encounters that prioritize connection, exploration, and pleasure over achieving specific outcomes. The circular model also explains why many women report that their most satisfying sexual experiences aren't necessarily those that include orgasm, but those that include deep connection, thorough exploration, and genuine presence from both partners. At the core of female arousal is a fundamental requirement for safety, not just physical safety, but emotional, psychological, and relational safety. The female nervous system is designed to prioritize survival over pleasure, which means that any perceived threat, stress, or insecurity can shut down sexual response immediately. Creating safety requires ongoing attention to the quality of communication, the resolution of conflicts, the maintenance of trust, and the cultivation of emotional intimacy. It requires both partners to understand that sexual problems are often relationship problems in disguise. Safety also requires freedom from judgment, criticism, or pressure to perform in specific ways. Women need to know that their natural response patterns will be accepted, that variability in arousal is normal, and that their partner's satisfaction doesn't depend on their ability to respond in predetermined ways. When safety is established and maintained, it creates the foundation for arousal to flourish. When safety is compromised, no amount of physical stimulation or romantic effort can override the nervous system's protective responses. The solution to most sexual compatibility issues lies not in trying to change how female arousal works, but in understanding and working with its natural patterns. This requires integrating emotional preparation, physical attunement, and psychological engagement into a comprehensive approach to intimacy. Emotional preparation involves creating connection, resolving conflicts, and ensuring that both partners feel valued and appreciated outside of sexual contexts. Physical attunement requires learning to touch in ways that build arousal gradually and respond to feedback about what feels good. Psychological engagement means activating the mind as well as the body and creating mental involvement in the sexual experience. This integrated approach transforms sex from a performance-based activity focused on achieving specific outcomes to an exploration-based experience focused on creating connection and pleasure. It honors the complexity of female arousal while creating satisfaction for both partners. The most revolutionary understanding about female arousal is that it's not broken, deficient, or problematic. It's simply different from male arousal in ways that require different approaches, different timing, and different expectations. When couples embrace these differences rather than fighting against them, they often discover that female arousal patterns create opportunities for deeper intimacy, more varied experiences, and more satisfying sexual relationships overall. The women who understand their responsive desire patterns stop waiting for spontaneous arousal and start creating conditions for responsive arousal. The men who understand these patterns stop taking lack of immediate response personally and start learning how to create contexts that support their partner's natural arousal development. Understanding how female arousal actually works isn't just about improving sexual relationships. It's about creating authentic intimacy based on reality rather than mythology. It's about honoring the actual design of female sexuality rather than trying to force it into male-designed templates. The truth about female arousal is that desire doesn't come first for most women. It emerges through safety, develops through connection, builds through appropriate stimulation, and flourishes when given time, attention, and freedom from pressure to perform. When couples understand and embrace this truth, they stop waiting for lightning strikes and start creating the conditions where natural arousal can unfold in its own time and in its own way. They discover that real intimacy isn't about spontaneous combustion. It's about skillful cultivation of connection that honors how bodies and minds actually respond to each other. If this explanation of how female arousal really works has helped you understand why so many couples struggle with sexual compatibility despite genuine attraction, subscribe to this channel for more insights into the realities of human sexuality that contradict cultural myths. Hit that notification bell because understanding these truths could transform your approach to intimacy and help you create the authentic connection that both partners actually crave. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand that female sexuality isn't broken or difficult. It's just different from what we've been taught to expect. The couples who learn to work with these differences rather than against them discover levels of intimacy and satisfaction that performance-based sexuality can never provide.